Hello again and welcome to the Distiller podcast. I'm Brandon Dawson and today we are recording from New Riff Distillery. We're live at New Riff in Northern Kentucky. In just a second, we're going to talk a little bit about New Riff Distillery, but first I want to welcome my guest for today, Matt Gunderman. He's the director of Air Care and Mobile Care at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. Matt, thank you first of all for joining us today.
Hey, this is great. Love coming out on a Sunday afternoon. Thanks.
Perfect. A little bourbon on a Sunday afternoon.
Nothing better.
Yeah, no reason not to do it. So we'll dive in for a second and talk about what you do. First, I want to, first of all, say thank you to Hannah, who's the general manager of New Riff Distillery, for letting us come in today and for sharing some of your amazing things with us that we're going to taste here in just a second.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Cool. We are, for people that have never been here, New Riff Distillery is in Northern Kentucky, technically we were just talking about this, technically Newport, although...
We're on the line of Newport and Bellevue.
It seems like Bellevue.
Yes.
Okay, physically shares a parking lot with the Party Source, and if you've ever driven by and you've seen this beautiful building that's been here a little while, 2014, you opened, I had no idea that everything that exists in here does exist.
Yeah.
So tell us, we're on the third floor, we're in the room, what room?
We call this the tower room.
Okay.
So the distillery itself is basically wrapped in an event center. And we're on the third floor in a big, beautiful space with a terrace overlooking Bellevue.
Yes.
The windows overlook
Scenic
Newport.
Bellevue, Kentucky.
Yeah. We have lots of private events up here. We throw parties. We've done a lot of tastings. You name it has been in this room over the last 3 or 4 years.
Cool. And first of all, if people want to know more about New Riff, the website?
The website, newriffdistilling.com.
Okay.
Of course, on social, all the handles are at New Riff. Or come down and see us. Our tours are free, Tuesday through Sunday. So we take you through the whole building. Unless there's a wedding or something going on up here, you get to see it from grain to barrel.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about what we're going to be tasting today.
Yeah, so I have 2 things so you guys have a really successful podcast. The first is we were playing around this week making a cocoa nib infused Manhattan. So this is a bourbon Manhattan made with our OKI single barrel whiskey, Contrado red vermouth, some bitters, and then we actually rested that or aged that on cocoa nibs, which is a way to impart some really tasty chocolate flavors without it being like super sweet and kind of kick you in the face.
Yep.
And I had made this big jar of it earlier in the week and hid it, and what is left, as you guys see, is a taste. We have a rabid, hungry group of distillers. We have a lot of leftover catering, and it always disappears pretty quickly. So next time I'll hide it under my desk or something.
Right, hide it a little
but
better.
You guys will be able to taste that, and then I also have a bottle of our OKI single barrel. So this is whiskey that was actually distilled in Indiana. We bought a handful of barrels before we opened because we're waiting for our bourbon and rye, New Riff's flagship products, to turn at least 4 years old. So in the waiting period, the last 3.5 years, people want bourbon. This is a wonderful bourbon. This is actually 11 years old, this barrel, 147, and we just haven't changed the label yet. We'll change it next year when it turns 12. And essentially, OKI will go extinct next year when our whiskeys come out.
Oh,
so
wow.
if you like it, get yourself a bottle. But it is a wonderful high rye bourbon. It's 35% rye in the mash bill, so it's got a lot of spice. We barrel at barrel proof, non-chill filtered, so we don't cool it off and scrape off all the good fats and oils out of the whiskey. We are ideologically opposed to to chill filtration. And I've got some rocks glasses for you, so I'll pour you a little something, and then I'll leave you to cast away.
Should we taste the...
Yeah, taste the Manhattan.
And tell us a little bit about what should we expect here? What are we looking for?
A Manhattan is like one of the most classic bourbon cocktails you can imagine. One of the things that we really focus on here is, quality of ingredients. And so we use a really nice vermouth. It's an Italian vermouth. And for me, the chocolate infusion and the good vermouth really balances with the spice of the high rye whiskey. So it's sweet, but without being like gut rot sweet.
Yeah. It's really good.
It's really tasty.
It's really...
when you have like 3 good ingredients and then you rest it on cocoa nibs for a week, it's hard to go wrong with.
Nothing. And so this isn't necessarily something people can buy, this.
No, but we can show you exactly how to make it. Okay. I mean, it's really simple. We love Manhattans and old fashions in the building. They are staples. Anyone can make them. And then there's really fun ways to do little variations. Like this cocoa nib thing is something we've done for the holidays the past couple of years. It's always impressive at a party.
Right on.
You know, to be like, oh, this is a cocoa nib infused Manhattan. You'll score some
Sounds
big
pretty
points.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can really do it with anything, but it goes great with bourbon. And actually, it's really good with rye, too. As I was saying, this is a high rye bourbon, so the spice balances, but it's yummy.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I like that it was rested on cocoa nibs.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to learn in the bourbon industry to use words like rested
Yeah.
and aged and all sorts of stuff. So
It tastes rested. So I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
well, I will pass these to you guys.
All right.
A rocks glass with some of this stuff. Terry doesn't want hers with any ice, which I
No,
respect
she's
greatly.
a purist.
Yeah.
Yep, I respect that.
Yeah, and we always suggest to people here on our tours, which are free, when we do a tasting, we try not to judge anyone. You want to drink your bourbon with Sprite or ice or neat or whatever, we're happy people are drinking bourbon.
Sprite, I would judge.
It's,
No, I mean, there's got to be a line.
there's a difference between public judgment and in your own mind judgment,
Fair enough. Okay, good enough.
As a company policy, New Riff Distilling does not judge based on what you drink your bourbon with. But we do always suggest people to actually stick the very tip of their tongue down in the bourbon because that's the only part of your tongue that can taste sweet. And so some of that good, kind of sugar, vanilla, caramel flavors really come through with just the tip of your tongue before you take a whole sip. But again, you guys drink however you like while you're talking, and
Awesome.
we're happy to have you.
Thank you so much,
You're
Hannah. We
welcome.
really appreciate it.
Thanks for the tasting hint there.
All right, so a little sip. I tried the first one. Now to compare, just to wet the whistle a little bit. Really nice.
Wow. Yeah.
I was telling Hannah, she just walked out. I was telling her I took a bottle of this OKI bourbon down to Georgia for Thanksgiving, and it was a hit. It did not last the first night.
Yeah.
So, good stuff. I can attest. All right. Well, thanks again to New Riff Distillery. This is going to be good. Matt, again, thank you. Really appreciate you joining us for the podcast, even if we did have to bribe you with amazing.
It was pretty easy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
Yeah.
You have an amazing title. You have an amazing job. I'm actually really interested to talk to you, but I do have to say that just even looking at your resume, you have a whole bunch of letters behind your name. Is that a nursing industry thing?
It's a nursing medical industry thing, and it's I really value education and continuing my education, and those letters represent me continuing to further my knowledge in my industry.
I said your official title is the Director of Air Care and Mobile Care at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. You tell me,
Yes.
what do you do?
I think I have a really fantastic job. I do a lot of stuff. So I'll step back just a little bit in that I got into this job because I was a flight nurse for University Air Care and Mobile Care for a bunch of years and a lot of history before that. But and I kind of worked my way through and realized after a bunch of years that I wanted to impact more than just a single patient on the helicopter. And how can I do that? And so I got into the management world. What I do now as the director, officially I'm over everything that has to do with air care and mobile care, so our aircraft and our ambulances and a few other areas of the hospital that I cover, special events where we provide medical coverage for sporting events, things of that nature. But mostly it's the aircraft and the ambulances from clinical care to FAA regulations to building codes with how to build a helipad and what lighting you need to everything aviation and medical, really.
Okay, and just in case, I mean, I think you've made it clear, but air care, this is helicopter rescue. This is the helicopter, if you live in Cincinnati, that's taking off from the University of Cincinnati campus, urgent rescue.
Yep.
And you flew, you're not flying now, but you flew for many years
Yep.
on those crews.
Yeah, so I flew full-time for about 8 years. And I fly occasionally now, still getting the ground ambulances once in a while. But I'm primarily on the administrative and management side now.
Let's go back a little bit. You started out, you were a paramedic, firefighter paramedic?
Yes.
Is that the right nomenclature?
Yeah, firefighter paramedic.
Okay, so you're in the ambulance.
And the fire trucks.
How many years doing that?
So I did that initially for about 5 or 6 years, and I got into this. I went to college on an odd mountain biking scholarship, but thinking I was going to be a forest ranger.
That sounds like a story. An odd
There's
mountain biking
more. There's
scholarship.
more to that. Yeah,
What could
not
that
a lot of
possibly
colleges have. The college offered had a mountain bike race on their property in the woods that was kind of big in Ohio and West Virginia. And one of the prizes that they offered was scholarships to their school. And I specifically was planning to go to their school. So my mountain bike team and myself went up there, and we had a very strong mountain bike team, and I got free tuition.
Nice.
from doing well at some mountain bike races. But yeah, so I wanted to be a park ranger, so went up there for that, and I was too young and slightly averse to carrying a gun, which is part of the park ranger thing that you got to do, and thought I wanted to get into knowing how to care for people in the backcountry, and so I went to EMT school there and really got pulled right into the medical aspect of that, so went directly into paramedic school, and then came back to Cincinnati, started working as a paramedic and got my firefighting certification.
Okay. So what was it that pulled you in? Because that's a question that I kind of ask everybody. Is this something you thought you would do from an early age, or is it something you sort of figured out along the way? It sounds like it's something kind of found you at a certain point. What was it at that point that that really pulled you into that aspect of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. After I had been in that profession for many, many years, and it was probably just about 10 years ago that I ran into a friend from grade school who reminded me that I'd completely forgotten, and she said, I always thought that's what you would do. And I hadn't seen her since like 5th grade, and she reminded me of some instances in grade school and things for caring about people that were injured on the playground or something of that nature. In my mountain bike racing and road racing career, I came across some other injuries. I was on a road crew at a professional bike race and was the first one to come upon a professional bike racer who went off the road into some trees and died of a head injury, and tried to care for him.
Without, at that point, any
no
medical
training at all. And so I think I had a few instances in my life before that maybe started to help me gravitate, maybe unknowingly, to wanting to be in that kind of profession.
What, in those instances, because I would imagine you have a million of those stories since, like, is there a part of you that turns on? I mean, some people, sight of blood, obviously, they become squeamish. Other people just wouldn't know what to do, would just freeze up seeing that kind of, a person in that kind of danger. Even in those, before you had medical training, what happens in you when you see somebody in need like that?
I think, and more so as I get older, I think I have a desire to just help people for a lot of reasons, or in a lot of ways, whether that's medical or in their life or whatever it is. And I think just being a caring person and then not being the squeamish type, I think helps out a lot. I like to fix problems, and I like to fix things, and that is what really critical care medicine is all about.
Right on. So tell me again, you may have already said this, how many years did you spend in the helicopter?
So I was a full-time flight nurse for about 8 years.
Okay.
Yep.
And all here at the University of Cincinnati?
Yep.
Okay. Tell me a little bit, I mean, I don't want to get into, like, tell me your stories. I would imagine you have a million of them, but tell me about that work. Like, what did those days look like? What kind of hours were you working? What's going on when you're not flying?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So the life of a flight nurse is typically 12-hour shifts, working 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. You come in.
How many days a week?
Typically, if you're full-time, 3 or 4, but usually you're picking up extra.
Okay.
Coming in, and you are on from the time you clock in to potentially being called out for a flight. So you come in, you check your aircraft, so you have to make sure all your medical equipment is appropriate. That can take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour plus, depending on what's going on, and making sure that the aviation side of the business is doing well. So your pilot is doing aviation checks, they're making sure that the maintenance is good on the aircraft. There's mechanics that are in checking the engines and everything like that. So kind of like that first hour or two of your shift, if you don't have a flight during that time, you're really preparing for the rest of the day, seeing if something's broken, something needs to be fixed, whatever that may be.
How many people in the crew?
So the great thing about university's Air Care program is we fly with physicians and advanced practice nurses along with the critical care flight nurses, which is a lot different. Most places fly with a lesser trained crew. But you have 2 medical people and 1 pilot.
Okay.
Is your primary crew. So the pilot strictly flies. The medical people don't fly. A lot of people ask if the pilot is medicine trained, and he's not, because we want him to focus on that complex job of flying the aircraft. And
is that relationship between the aviation people and the medical people tight?
It's very tight.
Okay, so you guys you're living together during that time. You're working together. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Having dinner afterwards and everything. You got to be tight on a team like that because you have to understand what people's strengths and weaknesses are. Even whether they're a pilot or a medical person, whether you're a physician, a nurse, a paramedic, an EMT, if you have a team, it's always different. You have to know where people's strengths and weaknesses
And are you
are.
consistently in the same team, or are
No,
you rotating
it does
with different
rotate.
people?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a big team, and you get to know people. And I kind of like that. Some teams are very small, right? It might be 3 people. Our team is a lot larger, and you really got to get to know the nuances. But it's really also makes it important that the first part of your shift you're spending talking about what's going on,
Okay.
right? And we expect our people to come in, and if they're stressed in their life for that day, or they've been sick, or they didn't get enough rest, that they're sharing that with the crew and making some decisions about
Wow.
safety and whatnot, to say, hey, I'm feeling great. I got 10 hours of sleep, or you know what, my child was up in the middle of the night. I'm a bit fatigued. Because that can play a part through the day.
What would you do? Somebody comes in and they're like, "I'm not fit for this." Do you swap them out immediately?
Oh yeah. If someone comes in and says, I am too tired to work, or I'm ill, I can't fly, they don't fly. There's no question.
You say, "Why didn't you call us before you came
Yeah,
in?"
right. Why'd you show up today?
Yeah.
But no, we have a saying that is all to fly, one to say no. So it takes the agreement of everyone on the aircraft and in our communications center, our dispatchers, to agree to take a flight. If any one person, for any reason, says, no, I don't feel that this is safe, for any reason,
To the flight itself.
To the flight itself, you don't fly.
Okay, and that can be based on weather. It can be based on the equipment, the
Personal,
aircraft.
everything. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
On average, how many flights a day, or per shift?
Yeah, so we do last year we did just under 1,500 patient flights, but that's divided between 3 aircraft.
Okay.
So you could have a day where you have 8 flights, and you could have 2 or 3 days where you don't have a single flight, especially in winter when if you have freezing rain, you have conditions where you could get icing on the rotor blades, we just won't fly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in that case, it's whatever ground-based services are available. And
Yeah,
closest.
ground-based services, and also our helicopters, because we also maintain a fleet of ground ambulances. Sometimes our helicopter crews will go out on those ground ambulances and respond.
So I know there's a tendency to say, like, tell me your worst stories. Tell me, like, situations, not things you've seen, not people, not the horror stories for that. Tell me physical situations of weather or risk that have been troubling to you that you've gotten into.
Well, I appreciate that question, because most people do want to know that horror story, for which there's a thousand. And what really is I think more interesting is exactly what you said, is the situations that people get themselves into and that we respond to. There are so many. I'll go back to one maybe before I was even a flight nurse. One of the situations where I was a paramedic, and that really solidified my desire to become a flight nurse. And I was actually riding along River Road on my motorcycle, studying for my nursing board exams. I'd been a paramedic for a bunch of years, and so I was had my helmet on and had some earplugs in my ears, and I was listening to review tapes for this big test. And I see a police officer behind me, lights and siren, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a ticket. I was driving too fast or something of that nature. And he goes by me very quickly, and I think, ooh, gosh, I'm not going to get a ticket. And then I look up ahead, and I see a big column of smoke up ahead. And within 30 seconds, I'm at that column of smoke, which is a car on fire, 2 other cars involved in this head-on accident. And I was the first medical person there. And I kind of rode my motorcycle through the cars there, parked it on the other side, came back. A few people were out of their vehicles, significantly burned. There was one person in a vehicle that was right next to the burning vehicle, and he was unconscious and needing a lot of care. And so a lot of my paramedic training and whatnot came into play. Soon after that, a couple minutes later, a fire truck that was at a parade came up on the scene, and there was, I think, just one or two EMTs there. So I proceeded to treat and care for the guy in the burned car. Luckily, I had my leather motorcycle coat on because the heat from the fire was pretty unbearable.
What had caused the fire?
One of the cars that crossed the yellow line had a trailer with a race car that had some sort of race car fuel.
Yeah.
So that exploded. Ultimately, it was a big to do, as you can imagine. A lot of work getting that guy out of his car quickly before any of us burned. Mm-hmm. But Air Care came.
Okay.
And Air Care came and flew 3 people from that scene, and so I was there that entire time. And I had experiences with Air Care from being a paramedic in the region anyway, but that was my first really close experience where I was caring for those patients in that situation. And I was just immensely impressed, and it really made me think, you know what, that is what I want to do.
Right on. How long after that was it that you headed that direction?
Well, I started heading in that direction right then.
Okay.
But it takes a long time.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get on the helicopter at university.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very competitive program because it's a desired position as a nurse. It takes a lot of years of experience. Their minimum requirements, or our minimum requirements, are very high. So it took a lot of years. It was 10 years after I got my nursing license before I got on Air Care. And all of those years I dedicated to trying to get that job.
And that seems to me, from what I know about your story, sort of there was a long, intentional commitment to development and education to get to the next step. So it takes you 10 years to get from that first inkling of awareness that this might be the right position to you, and then you get in there, and then you realize that maybe you can do more good in an administrative or management position in the program. Talk about that then, because you start flying. There's a whole area around that, but I think I've known you for better part of 10 years. Most of that time, I think you've sort of been in school in the process of getting to where you are now.
Yep.
Talk about those decisions. Once you got into that place, what was your awareness? Was there a similar experience that said, okay, the next stop is somebody who's overseeing the program, or was it more organic than that?
I like the word organic. Yeah, accidental maybe. No, I was really happy as a flight nurse, as being on the helicopter and making that daily patient contact, and being the guy doing the procedures, doing the skills on the patients, and really being involved in their care and everything, aviation wise. I ended up going back to school, going to graduate school. To become a nurse practitioner with a focus in critical care medicine with adults. And it was near the end of that as an adult with a child, with a family, you're in graduate school, you're working full time. Mm-hmm. My mom was dying of cancer at the time. I was pretty maxed out on what was going on in my life. And ultimately, I needed a break. So the program came to me and asked if I wanted to be one of the clinical managers to help run the program. And it's not something that I had thought about prior to that. And although I'd been an educator and a clinician for a long time, I never thought of really formalizing it in that manner. Mm-hmm. So I thought about it for a little while. They actually let me do a trial run for 3 months and said, hey, we'll hold your position as a flight nurse.
Wow.
And we'll let you get into this clinical manager position for 3 months. See if it works out for you. And it did. I liked it a lot. I liked impacting a lot bigger bigger projects. I really feel, though, I used to take care of a single patient at a time typically, or a few if we were at a mass casualty incident at a time. And now I really feel like I get to impact the care of all the patients that the people in our program transport. So it's very different because I'm not as hands-on with the clinical care. But my impact in being able to support them in providing that clinical care is super important to me.
That's interesting because I think there's in many industries that you can think of that are service or care oriented, there's a transition between actually caring for people and managing the care of people. Academics, for instance, you're teaching people and then you take on an administrative position and then you're no longer teaching people. And a lot of people sort of feel like they lose the impact at that point. It doesn't sound like that's been the case for you. It sounds like you still feel directly connected to the people that you care for, even if you aren't necessarily hands-on.
I do, yeah. I very much do, because I want to care for my staff in the same way. They're not disengaged from me, or I'm not disengaged from them. I'm very involved in the clinical care and the clinical reviews with our staff, but I also still do transports. So I still get out there some. I've been temporarily for the last 4 or 5 months been the director of the emergency department at University of Cincinnati Medical Center also, and I've been going back because I have the opportunity to be an ER nurse also at times. It's not something I have to do as a director. It's not expected of me. In fact, it's, and they need me to do other stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes, it's my option. It helps me be a better director to stay in touch with patients.
How does the position that you currently hold change how you do that work when you do it? Do you view it differently when you're doing it?
Oh, yeah. I think the patient care side is pretty similar. The clinical aspect of it is the same. I really understand the impact of providing great customer service now in a way that I didn't before. And people don't think of healthcare, especially in critical situations, as providing customer service like you might on a retail scale, and it's not. It's very different than that. In fact, I don't like the term customer service in healthcare, but that is the in vogue term right now, because people often don't have a choice to come to your hospital like they do to go to a retail place. So I look at that patient experience a lot differently than I used to, and it's in a great way. Like I'm if I ever wanted to go back to being strictly a clinician again, I think I would be immensely better than I was, because I understand the business aspect and the customer service side in a different way than I did before.
What do you bring uniquely to the management aspect of it? In the oversight, now not talking so much about the direct patient care or customer care, but when you're thinking about the work that you did for the years that you were in an ambulance, the years that you were in the helicopter, and now trying to be a great leader and manager for your team and for your program, I guess both directions. How does the work that you did all those years inform who you want to be for that? And then what do you think is unique about your perspective in managing and leading that program that you want to put your stamp on it right now?
Yeah, so my employees are EMTs, paramedics, nurses, nurse practitioners, physicians indirectly, and a bunch of other people. And I'm the third director of University's Air Care program. It opened in 1984. So to be 33, 34 years strong and just be the third director of the program is pretty powerful to me. I'm also the first person that's a director that was an EMT, that was a paramedic, that was also a flight nurse, was also an ambulance nurse, also worked in our communications. Dudley Smith, who still works for us, started the program. Wonderful man, great vision. Started the program as part of his graduate school project at University of Cincinnati.
But didn't come from a hands-on background.
Well, he was an EMT. So he had a hands-on background, but was getting more into the management side. And then the director right before me, she was also a critical care nurse.
Okay.
The difference is I've done all the jobs, not just one of them. And so
it wasn't they were pure administrators who came in without
no,
any sense.
Gosh,
they
no,
just
it's
didn't
always
touch
been
everything the way you have.
Yeah. I'm able to look at the entire program differently, I think, than people in the past. And I think there's benefits and faults to that, right? Because you always bring something strong and you bring, things that aren't as strong. So I think that's that's probably my strengths, is I've done all of the jobs before, and I can relate pretty well. My vision is a little different. My management team sometimes calls it Matt's World. And I'm amused by that because, and I like that. Healthcare, and especially healthcare at an academic hospital, is very traditional. It's a lot of old thinking.
This is the way we've always done it.
This is the way we've always done it. And at UC, this is the way we've done it for 200 years, right? They've been around for a very, very long time. And that tradition is an anchor, right? It doesn't let you progress very, very well. So I don't have that. I don't have those traditional anchors. I want to do things differently. I read a lot of books on different subjects, different types of management and leadership, and I want to bring a different perspective to healthcare leadership than what is traditionally out there. And I think there's a lot of people like me right now who realize that we got to look at things differently. We're forced to because of the economics of healthcare that are going on right now, but also the emergence of really great clinical care. You know, the science behind taking care of people has been changing rapidly, and it's hard to keep up with it. So we can't, what I tell my folks is what we were doing last year, if we're not doing it differently this year, then we're behind. And that's clinically and operationally.
What's controversial about what you might do versus somebody else? Or what you want to do?
That's probably a good question for some of my staff that might not appreciate all my all the things that I want to do. What I really look at differently is that with Air Care, such a strong pillar of the community, we are really a community resource. Even though we're at University Hospital, we support all the hospitals, all the EMS agencies in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. Is that I'm not trying to make Air Care successful for the next 2 years or 3 years, 5-year plans. Whatever, right? I want Air Care to be there in 30 years. And so I have a much different long-term vision than I think most people in healthcare have now. Healthcare right now is really a lot of people trying to make immediate changes to immediate problems, and they don't have the opportunity often, and I sometimes don't either. I'm often putting out fires to have that really long-term strategic plan. To me, when someone says our long-term strategic plan is 5 years, well, if you own a gas station, maybe that's okay. But if you're in a healthcare institution that's been around for 200 years, that you want to be around in another, you got to be thinking long-term. So you got to be able to mix those short-term actions and make sure that they feed right in with a long-term strategic plan that's, to me, is 30 years.
Okay. And, I mean, is that primarily technology-based? Is it care-based? Is it, what are the things that you're trying to pull in that there's resistance to in order to think that far ahead?
Yeah, I would, probably the number one thing is quality.
Okay.
There's a lot of different types of aeromedical programs in the country. There's a few that are really large, for-profit medical programs that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Their business model is to make the cost of care, or what they pay for the cost of care, as little as possible. They charge significantly higher than anyone else, so they have a profit margin so that they can sell stocks, and one of them just got bought by another equity firm. They're owned by equity firms. Their bottom line is their stock price. My bottom line is lives saved, and that means quality. So the quality of care that we provide, I kind of say that University of Cincinnati Medical Center, and in the same as probably at other academic medical centers that have a helicopter program, is we're like the Nordstroms if you were a retail, and some of the other medical programs are like a Walmart, right? They're out in the rural communities. A lot of people like them. You can go and get your plasticware and your, jeans made out of the country very cheaply, and they'll last about that long. But we're more of a boutique medical service because we reinvest every dollar back into taking care of patients. There's no money being made in my program. We're a break even. We push the limits on clinical care that others don't. We have more research out there that is impacting the clinical care of medical programs all around the world right now that comes out of the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. So we do a lot of research. We push other people to be better. And that's really our goal, is to not only provide great care here, but to be a leader for the entire world.
This is why I love having these conversations, is because you think, I don't know what you do. I don't know how you spend your day, and I know what you do. But then when you start to get into the nitty-gritty of sort of what somebody's daily concerns are and see what makes them passionate about what they do, I mean, that makes me proud of what you do. It makes me proud that we have this service here in Cincinnati that we may not know, that people may not know enough about it and enough about what you do and the mechanics of it to understand that it's kind of something special that we have available to us, not only in terms of the standard of care that we have, but in terms of the approach that it takes, especially when compared to the rest of who knew that there was an industry around this.
Yeah,
of course, there's an industry around this, and that what we have available to us in Cincinnati is protected to some degree against the negative aspects of the industry.
We're trying, but Walmarts are popping up and Nordstroms are closing. And
I'm surprised to hear you say this. You think there's something wrong with our healthcare industry.
It's
I've
odd,
not heard
isn't
that
it?
before.
I know. I apologize for bursting that healthcare bubble for you. But it's happening. It's happening.
Oh, crap.
I know. So we're trying to still be a super high quality program, and we're trying to be really safe. Helicopters are generally safe, but if they're not operated at the highest quality, then they crash and people die, right? And that happens in medical helicopters. We push safety. Our number one value at our program is safety. Our second value is clinical excellence. Because if we can't fly there or drive there in one of our ambulances safely and return the patient safely, it doesn't matter how good our clinical care is. So we tell our patients, or not our patients, our staff, we have a motto is if they're confronted as to what am I supposed to do in this situation, we say, first decide what is the safest way to do it, second decide what's best for the patient, and if your decision is positive on both of those, then we're going to support whatever you decided to do. Whether it's written in our policies or not, you made the right decision.
That actually brings up something that I wanted to talk to you about, because the notion of safety as you conceive of it is probably pretty different than as most people. Some of the materials that I've got that Terry gave me in sort of setting this up for you and getting ready for the interview are talks that you've done on safety and preventable errors and things like that. What do people, I guess I have a couple of different questions about this. I kind of want to ask, like, what do you know that we don't know that we should? What do you wish we would do? You said you used to ride a motorcycle. I don't know if you still do. I know you still mountain bike a lot. Like, what does safety mean in terms of people's daily lives? And if you had sort of a soapbox to get on and say, people, don't be stupid. What are your top? What do you want to say to people in that context?
All right, I have to be careful because I'm not speaking to my own kind here. We have a different sense of humor. So I'll be thoughtful.
Which is
with
actually
that.
No, literally is one of my other questions. Is I want to know what the sense of humor is. I assume that you guys make fun of us civilians in a way that we have no understanding of, and I want to know what that is too.
We'll come back to that in a mild flavor. But I'm a bit of a safety guru in medical transport. So I've some of those letters after my name have to do with specialty certifications. It took years to get. Based on education in safety management for medical transport systems. So I'm a little odd in that, even in my industry. So when we look at risk, we look at what is, how much risk are you willing to take, right? So I used to rock climb, still do a little bit. I mountain bike now, right? Mm-hmm. There's risk involved in that. I can decide to go down that very steep hill that has a lot of roots, or I can decide not to. When I'm riding with other people, what their permissible risk is different than mine, right? Mm-hmm. And I might have more permissible risk, and they might have less, or vice versa. So with with risk analysis, you have to kind of bring the science into it and say, well, not only is what is an individual's tolerable risk, but what is the program's or industry's tolerable risk. So before each of our flights, we do a risk assessment. There's basically a form, it's electronic, that's filled out by the pilot that the crew has input on as to what is our risk analysis for this flight. And if it falls into a certain category, different things change. Now, having a high risk category on a risk analysis doesn't automatically mean that you don't do something. So the goal with a risk analysis, and people are going to think I'm some sort of weird safety nerd. I'm not. I do a lot of stupid stuff just like anyone else. But you think about, how can I pull the risk down? All right. So if I have a risk assessment, which is a level of red, which means stop, I'm not going to do this. It doesn't mean I necessarily just stop and cancel everything related to that. It says, okay, now what made it red, and what can I do to bring that risk down to a manageable level, or to a level that we agree is a go on this. So a high risk assessment isn't a stop necessarily, or it might be a temporary stop to say, hey, what can we do? All right, if you're something simple is you have ice on your sidewalk, right? Because there was a freezing rain last night, and you think, oh my gosh, I'm not very stable on that. I'm not going to go outside. All right, you did a self-assessment. You did a risk analysis. You said red. I'm not going anywhere. What we would do is say, well, that is a red. Can we bring that down to a yellow by putting some salt out there, chipping the ice, waiting 2 hours for it to melt, and still achieve the goal that we wanted to achieve? And obviously, in our industry, it's a lot different. We're not just chipping ice away. So it's doing different things.
What do you take that approach in your personal life? I mean, it's obviously a systematic approach that you use here. Does it cross over?
I think about it, but I don't. I would
You're
never.
not checking a list.
No, I'm not checking a list, and I don't verbalize these things.
Yeah.
Do I wish that our forks could be loaded with the tines down in our dishwasher in case you tripped and fell on them? Yes, I do. I think about that every time. There's stupid little things like that.
I'm a tines up person.
You know what? Yeah. Right. Do they get cleaner with the tines up? I don't know. But what happens when that 3-year-old's over and he's reaching in?
How does this change how you parent? Seriously.
Oh, my gosh. So my son today skateboarded over to an abandoned building with friends, where they climbed a fence to go up a fire escape onto like the 4th floor where there's an open window.
All of this sounds perfect.
Yeah. And that's cool. So I don't know that I guess it changes my parenting in that last night when he was telling me about this, and with Nicole, we were talking, well, tomorrow, it's supposed to be freezing overnight, so there's probably going to be some ice. So be careful that when you're on the roof of that building, don't slip off. But and that's where that risk analysis comes in, right? Informally is we didn't say don't do it. Right?
How to minimize.
Probably the police should have said that, should have stepped in. But yeah, it's how do you minimize that risk and still stay safe? And it's cool because my son does that a lot, whether he's climbing, mountain biking, or going exploring abandoned buildings as a youngster, and he got some great photographs there. He's thinking about that risk, and that's what if we put more of that into society, I think we might be better off. But I know not everyone thinks the same way I do.
Yeah, but there's 2 ways to go with that. One is you're aware of the risks and you never let your son out of the house. The other is you're aware of the risks and you tell your son how to minimize them, and you make him smarter, and you recognize that they're going to happen. Yeah. What risks do you take that we would be surprised by? Is there anything that you do that we would assume that you would never do?
I load the dishwasher with the tines up, and it's crazy every time.
Crazy
I know. I got to
strike the matches with the cover open.
I just let loose once in a while. I'm not as risky as I used to be, but I want to get back into it. Honestly, I've been thinking about this for the last year. I used to mountain bike. I mountain bike raced. I rock climbed. I would free climb without ropes. and there was a lot of risk in that. And I think I transferred that risk once I got into being a paramedic and a firefighter, and the risk involved with, dealing with the buildings and going into burning buildings. And then the air medical industry has risk, obviously, or maybe not obviously. It's a very risky profession. And now that I've been in management for a number of years, I've realized over the last year that what I've been missing in my life is that risk. I've been getting back into mountain biking and trail running, and that's been great. So I'm trying to decide what am I going to do more to keep that part of my life that was so important to me when I was younger.
The other part of, kind of the reason that I didn't necessarily want to talk about, like, tell me the worst thing you've seen, is because that stuff leaves marks. And you don't have to tell us those stories to know that's there. What do you do? Granted, you're a little bit removed from that now and that you're flying less, but you're still flying a little bit. You're still going out. What do you do in the rest of your life that makes you okay with that? Like, how conscious are those things that you do, and what do you do to relieve the pressure of the things that you've seen or the things that you might see next week?
Yeah, so, now that I'm not flying like I used to, I'm not in those situations as much. I still see them in the emergency department when they come in. There's a lot to that. So there's a history in my mind of some of those events that will never leave my mind. That, some of them I wish they would, and some of them I'm glad they don't, even though they're not good events, because they change you in maybe not good ways, but ways that become part of you. I really need to be able to remove myself. So I'm my own person. I get into the woods a lot. And, my Saturday mornings, my favorite thing is to be out in the woods and making tea and sitting by a tree, watching some deer, or going down by the river, which I did today. I was up early. I had to go into work today for a while, and so I got out for an hour and brought my camping stove and a pot of water and my tea and sat by the, unfortunately, I couldn't go very far, but there's some great parts of the Mill Creek. If you're a Cincinnatian, you won't believe it, but there's some wonderful parts of the Mill Creek. And sat there along the Mill Creek and watched the fog come up off the river as the sun came up. And that's, I got to remove myself completely from work sometimes.
You mentioned tea a couple of times. Tea's something you actually care. You're not mentioning that because it just happens to be tea.
Oh, no, I'm a big tea guy.
Tell me about that.
So I got into tea. I don't drink coffee. So I got into tea.
Why don't,
I never liked the smell of it.
Okay.
So I don't know. I wish I did, because I'd love that much caffeine.
Sure.
So when I was in graduate school and I was staying up till 3 and 4 in the morning, I needed caffeine, and I don't typically drink sodas and things like that. So I started drinking tea, and then I started investigating tea and different kinds of tea and fermented teas and smoked teas and Chinese versus Korean versus Japanese and the brewing methods and all of that sort of stuff. So
you go pretty deep.
I'm pretty deep. Yeah, I love tea. Yeah.
And unsurprisingly, sort of applying the same rigor of learning that got all those letters behind your name to your personal hobbies.
Probably. Yep. At least that one.
Is that something? I don't know what the career path is. I don't know, and I guess I'd be interested in knowing that. So there's two questions there. You have apparently taken a long and fairly arduous but continually forward-moving career path to get to where you are now. Is there something that you're striving for now? And if there is, whether that lies within your professional life or within something that might be after your professional life or along with it, like, what are you looking forward to for the future?
Yeah, well, I love what I do, but it's very hard and it's a lot of hours. So this was my 7th day straight of work. Most of my days at work are 10 or 12 hours. It's a lot, and I am so passionate about what I do there and the program, the flight program, the ground program, and the patients that we care for, which is why I give that. But I'm looking to pull back at some point. It's not going to be in the next year or two. I don't know what that is. I think back of, what got me into this was going to school to be a park ranger. And I'm not going to go be a park ranger, but I've thought about being one of those volunteers at the parks. But I don't know what I'm going to do. I love being outside. If I could be outside, whether it's sun, rain, snow, it doesn't make any difference. I have a lot of interests. I really wish I was one of those people that had a single interest and I followed that passion perfectly through my entire life. I think those people are wonderful. I wish I was one. It seems so much easier. There's so much I want to do, and I don't know what the next step is. I really want another phase of a professional life that may be completely out of healthcare, or it may be doing something just different within healthcare. I've invested a lot in this. But I'm not at all afraid to jump into something else if it comes up. But I'm really embedded in our medical transport program right now. And
right on.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I really appreciate. I love just finding out what somebody else does. And you mentioned, somebody who has that singular linear path. I've always sort of wondered who those people are, and I've never been that person, which is why we're doing this. But just learning a little bit more about what you do and getting a little insight into how you care about it is really wonderful. So thanks for taking the time with us.
This has been great. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. This episode of the Distiller Podcast was recorded live at New Riff Distilling, 24 Distillery Way in Newport, Kentucky. Thanks again to Matt Gunderman for appearing on the show. For more information about the University of Cincinnati's Air Care and Mobile Care, visit this episode's page at thedistillerpodcast.com for links to UC Health's Air Care and Mobile Care web and Facebook pages. Special thanks to Hannah Lowe and General Manager of New Riff Distilling for welcoming us in. Drop by the distillery, see their amazing facilities. It really is beautiful. Host your next event there, get married there, take a tour, but whatever you do, make sure you taste some of their wares. The Distiller is produced, recorded, and hosted by me, Brandon Dawson, with co-production and booking from Terry Heist. We're mixed by Justin Golden. Our logo was designed by Scott Ryan. Download episodes, find more links and info, including photos of the guests and the locations, and get in touch with us at thedistillerpodcast.com. You can suggest people you think should be on the show. You can tell us where you think we should record the show or what you think we should drink while doing it. It's all at thedistillerpodcast.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.